blanket of clouds, plunging the world into an eerie darkness. When we arrived at the building, there were no lights visible from outside. The only indication that someone was there was the faint humming of a generator, despite the entire building looking completely abandoned. Behind the building, I noticed a few large waste bins. Out of curiosity, I approached one of them and found a discarded envelope with a logo imprinted on it. The logo read, Lustrum Pharmaceuticals. I showed it to Leonard and he raised an eyebrow. Lustrum Pharmaceuticals went under a long time ago, he murmured. They were rumored to be involved in some shady experimental treatments. The information was enough to finally bring the police back into the fold. We returned to the station and presented everything to the detectives, including the logo and Leonard's findings. They were skeptical at first, but when they realized that the clues pointed towards a defunct company linked to illegal practices, they took it more seriously. I finally had a chance of getting my mother back, or so I thought. If only I'd known the horrible things that nurse did to him. They organized a raid, gathering a SWAT team and other officers to infiltrate the building. I was not allowed to accompany them, but I insisted on waiting outside the police barricade filled with a mixture of hope and dread. I had to beg to go with them. Being a 14-year-old girl, they didn't want me to come too close during the raid so I wouldn't get injured. They eventually let me go with them to watch. Hours dragged by as I waited, Leonard by my side, his experienced eyes watching the operation unfold. Finally, in the early morning, the door of the building burst open and officers began to escort people out. Most were in handcuffs, members of the twisted organization responsible for taking my mother. And then, finally, I saw her. She was frail and weak, her face pale and her eyes filled with a haunted expression, but she was alive. Officers guided her carefully, placing her into an ambulance. A sob caught in my throat and I ran to her, tears streaming down my face. "Mom!" She turned her head and looked at me, her eyes widening with recognition and love. "Who are you?" she whispered.